All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Beyond the Resume. I'm really excited, not just because Santa's coming to town soon, but tonight Joe Davila is coming to town. The great Joe Davila, Master Gunnery Sergeant, retired United States Marine Corps, longtime friend and teammate of mine. You know, Joe, I was recently going through some clothes as I broke out the winter gear, and I had that sweater you gave me when I came to Damnick to speak at once was Nimitzi. I don't even know what we're calling it anymore. I think I gave a couple classes that day, and you kind of defaulted me as an instructor because of that, as only you could. So, Joe, thanks for coming here, and everyone out there, whether you're watching this on LinkedIn, Facebook, or on my YouTube channel, hey, send some comments. Let us know where you're watching us from. And any questions you have, because today we got a really special guest. Joe, similar to me, recently retired, but took a different path. And that's the message I want to get across to all you veterans and soon to be retirees, or even if you haven't served in the armed forces, that, as the song goes, you can go your own way and take your own path and things that you enjoy. And that's what Joe did. And we're going to get into that. But before I do, a good friend of mine, Lieutenant General Laster, retired, is the CEO of Toys for Tots. And I want to send a reminder out to all of you that if you're in a situation where you've got some spare change or you can buy a gift, what a superpower that is to give to others and to help out other folks through the Toys for Tots program. And so if you could do that, I'd appreciate it. And then a shout out to my old friend, to my friend, Lieutenant General Scott Howell, who recently joined the board at Wounded Warrior Project with me. And so in honor of him, he's a former commander of JSOC. I got my JSOC mug. Won't tell you what's in there. Might be a cocktail, might not be. But anyways, Joe, let's get into it. Thank you for joining us today, brother. Tell us where you're coming in from.
Yeah, I'm out here in Virginia Beach. It's where we decided to retire. It wasn't kind of a surprise this year because, when we moved out here as part of my last duty station, it's kind of, the place we figured we want to hover around a bit and kind of get settled in at. So I appreciate you having me on, Scott. You're like the Joe Rogan of these things for me. I've been watching you, the last 7 people. I was a little worried, though, because you've had some heavy hitters on here. I mean, it's kind of hard. You're the Chief Master of the Air Force, I think, on one of these shows. So now you got Joe Davila. So
Hey,
hopefully I'll try to live up to being number 8 on your calendar here.
that's right. We had the great Joe Bass, man. She's incredible, good teammate. But then now we got Joe Davila, and you're incredible too. And we all bring something special to everything. And my guest, as I begin the new year, I'll share that here at the end. I'm going to start cracking out some CEOs because I want to hear from them about what they're looking for when they're hiring talent. So, Joe, you joined the Corps as a young man, probably like me, before you could grow that little thing on your face that you got
Definitely.
now. Right.
Yes,
So
sir.
tell us about that. Where did you join from? What made you decide to join the Corps? And kind of get started in what you're doing now.
Yeah, so I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I grew up there, for the most part, my whole life. I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17. But I kind of knew I wanted to be a Marine when I was 15. And that actually, was an earth science class. I had this guy sitting behind me, named Alex. And, he was kind of pumped up and motivated about, graduating high school and, kind of lent me, I'm joining the Marine Corps thing. And I never really thought about it up to that point. But that started a long line of, being introduced to his recruiter, who became my recruiter. Ruben Vasquez, I still, everybody has this hallway of, I think, pictures in their mind, kind of like the National Art Gallery, right, of different like folks in their life that have done awesome things. My recruiter is definitely one of those for me, and I actually thanked him about a week or so ago, letting him know that, I really appreciated him, helping me out and, pretty much getting me into the Marine Corps. But yeah, that was it. Joined the Marine Corps from Brooklyn, New York, and, a little bit of hustle there, but, at the end of the day, it did give me something towards, looking forward to graduating high school. And, I only planned to do 4 years. In the multiverse, there's a Detective Joe Davila, because I kind of wanted to go back and, after 4 years and be an NYPD detective. I grew up on NYPD Blue and, some of those TV shows. But, after the 4th year, I got some things thrown my way that made me want to stick around. And, 27 years later, I called it a career.
Yeah, wow. Let's not downplay that. 27 years is in many ways a lifetime. That's remarkable. And you had truly one of the most unique and incredible careers of anyone I know. Unbelievable, right? So let's get into that. Now I screwed up and tried to sneak into infantry, and they found me in a line and said, "Hey, you're going to go to Intel." But I imagine you got it right the first time and didn't have trouble with your ASVAB. So tell us about getting into the intelligence community and how that was for you as a young Marine.
And so I mentioned hustle a little bit ago, and I think if you grow up in the inner city, everybody gets just a little bit of that as part of your soft skills, coming out. And oddly enough, I didn't mess it up, but at the time when I joined the Marine Corps, something with contracts or whatnot, they didn't have an Intel contract, and I knew I wanted to do Intel. So I gambled a bit. I went in open contract, which is not unheard of for young 17-year-olds that are just trying to become Marines, right? I just want to get me out of here. Let me at it, boss. So I got through boot camp, and I broke my foot at Paris Island. We were actually the test crucible, when I went through boot camp. So they did some weird experiments on us, while we were out there. At any rate, I broke my foot, but I still managed to get past the last 10-mile, march back to, the Iwo Jima Monument on the parade deck there. And I didn't realize my foot was broken until after I took my boot off, and the corpsmen were running around checking things, so I couldn't get my boot back on my foot. Senior drill instructor came out and said, you got past the crucible, so you're going to graduate, but we're going to bring you back here for 3 months. And, I'd do some medical rehabilitation while I was there. And that wasn't fun. But I did get an extra 3 months of mentorship by some of the best Marines, in the Marine Corps, right? Drill instructors down there were kind of our platoon sergeants, if you were there on hold. So extra mentoring, my Marine week that the Marines usually get now, I think it's a week long. I had a Marine 3 months with some awesome folks. But here's the key. I did what young Marines do. I went and I picked up trash, and we did like working parties and stuff like that. In my mind, I was like, I don't have a job yet. And I had remembered that during the moment of truth where they asked you that last time whether or not you did any drugs, I remember there were recruiters there, and this was Eastern Recruiting Region. So I made it my kind of thing to figure out how I could go on a working party at receiving, and just empty some trash cans there. And as luck would have it, I ran into some of the recruiters that were there, and as I was finishing up trash one day, one of them asked like, "What's your MOS going to be?" And so I don't have one. I'm open contract, but I knew they could help me there, and they did. They got me an Intel contract, and as luck would have it, probably about a week or two later, I was starting to feel like my foot was okay, and I got out of Dodge because I knew I had a future there and I had the job I wanted. So it's always good to place yourself in the right spot at the right time. And I, as luck would have it, I just happened to be there.
So even in boot camp, turning a bad situation, broken foot, excuse me, into an opportunity to network and connect. Well done there, Joe. Yeah, so when I went through boot camp, it was one of the last, I guess, we didn't have the crucible. So I'd love to talk to you off to the side about how they tortured you and kind of figured that one out. That's awesome. But now everyone has that, and I think it's incredible that we do have the crucible. You see the quality of Marines that are being poured out, just exceptional. And so you go on and do your career, and then you got to do something that I never could. And I am jealous about this. You got to become a drill instructor, go to drill instructor school. It's something that I applied to, and timing in our field of intel was one that mattered throughout our career, quite frankly. And there were times when the MOS was too short; they weren't going to let you take a B billet, as we call it, to be a drill instructor. And then there were windows to do it. And so, tell us about the opportunity to be a drill instructor and maybe what you learned from that opportunity.
Yeah, so it actually bleeds into the last thing, because I think everything that I'm going to talk about tonight really comes up to dumb luck and just like being able to put two and two together and try to get myself into situations that probably I wouldn't have if I had like sanity, right? So while I was finishing up my fourth year, I was at an air wing unit. And, I knew I wanted to stay Marine. And, back during that time frame, the only way to get out of the community was to do a B billet, probably recruiting at the time, because that's where they had quotas to go to, that the monitor was willing to get folks up to. So I actually volunteered for recruiting duty. A lot of people don't know that. I volunteered for recruiting duty first. But I had been volunteering with an organization called the Young Marine Program. It's kind of like a militarized Boy Scouts. And I've been doing that for about the whole 4 or 5 years that I had been in the Marine Corps up to that point. And there was a guy there that's been a lifelong mentor of mine, kind of like my Marine Corps dad figure. And he was a Chief Warrant Officer too at the time. And he said, Joe, you work with the kids all the time. You run them through little boot camps here. I thought you wanted to be a drill instructor. And I was like, well, sir, I did want to be a drill instructor, but, I'm going to go on recruiting duty and I'm going to make it happen. And, I had worked that bolt. I had talked to the sergeant major of the 1st Marine Corps recruiting district. I was trying to go back to Brooklyn to recruit, and by name requests set up and everything. And Chief Warrant Officer Jones was like, hey, you want me to make some phone calls for you? And I was like, well, sir, I don't know who he knew. I had no clue who he knew. But I was like, just don't get me in trouble, right? Whatever you do. So, lo and behold, I come in the next morning and my corporal comes up to me and he's like, Sergeant, I got a message for you. It was like 7:30 in the morning. I was like, man, this guy must have got told no quick, right? So I call him back and he's like, you want the good news or the bad news? And I was like, what's the good news? He's like, you're going to drill instructor school.
Nice.
I was like, what's the bad news? And he's like, it's a hot bill. You got to leave in a week. And I was like, totally blew my mind. Wasn't prepared. I was prepared mentally to go do it, but, physically, I probably would have been running a lot more. Probably would have been memorizing a lot more drill manual type stuff, but it was an opportunity that I couldn't waste. And I remember being conflicted because I had a section there that I wanted to continue to train and mentor. But I had a great, he was a prior enlisted captain, pilot, and he came up to me, he was my S2 at the time, and he's like, Joe, you're never going to get an opportunity like this, not in your field again. If I've got to take a gap for, a couple of months, then we'll just make do. We'll figure it out, but you go do you. And I did. I was able to get out of there in a week. I packed everything I had into my Nissan Sentra and I headed down to, be part of Class 3 Tag 01.
Yeah. And what an awesome leader you had there in that captain, whoever that was, because that shows one, confidence in himself to lead and for the Marines to step up, but two as well, an empowerment of you and giving you an opportunity. I think that's incredible. And if memory serves me right, there was a guy named Troy Black that might have had something to do with you getting your belt. We'll save that for another day. But you told me once that he was coaching you along the way. Is that fair?
Absolutely. He was my squad instructor at DI school.
Yeah. No, shout out to our SEAC. Troy Black is doing great things. All right, so let's move on a little bit into your career and fast forward a little bit, because we later in our careers, much later, connected at the Defense Intelligence Agency. And I had the opportunity to serve there as a command senior enlisted leader. Loved every moment of my time there with the great Lieutenant General Vince Stewart, God rest his soul. And this was at a time where you were serving as in the Alleged Affairs Office for the Marine Corps.
Right.
And at that point, you had to do a quote unquote payback, right? So walk us through that, how incredible that was, because we're going to come back to this later in terms of what you're doing now and that opportunity, if you will.
Right. And I can't say this enough to folks. Being a Marine in the fleet was awesome. I enjoyed every moment I was in the FMF, Camp Lejeune, Okinawa, Japan, or whatnot. But I would tell you, the Marine Corps has so many different opportunities for programs. And one of them that I latched onto was actually, I went to this, seminar, the E8 seminar, when I was a, Master Sergeant Select. And Sergeant Major Marine Corps was there. And he had been walking around and he was talking about the ability that he had just gotten to get enlisted Marines on this Congressional Fellowship Program. And it stuck with me. And then, 5 years later, when I was, in the process of PCSing and thinking about things, I applied for that program. So it was an excellent program, definitely career enhancing. And I think, the communities that you're part of, for mine, the Intel community, they definitely lose an asset in having a master sergeant in their field for that period of time. But the Marine Corps gains so much by having, folks out on these programs. And then, when you come back to the field, that's where I think some of the greatness happens, right? And I think, linking up with you while you were at DIA, finding out you had a gap there in the ledge affairs shop, and then the team there, that in OCC1, awesome folks to work with, interviewing me and bringing me on for the year and a half that I was there. I couldn't have asked for a better payback assignment working for you and General Stewart.
Yeah, it was incredible. And, I can say this story too. General Stewart relied heavily on you folks in the ledge affairs team. He really did. And, because he spent a lot of time in front of Congress. He had that Title 50 hat, he had that Title 10 hat, and he had to do things often with them, and including making sure that senior leaders were prepped from the intelligence perspective as they got to talk about their AOR. And so I know for certain he appreciated. But I'll follow up on that with a 4-star I worked with, Army 4-star, and he told me before he took over as a combatant commander how much he appreciated. I don't know how they worked this out, but for some reason, the Marines were assigned to him to prep him as he got ready for his congressional testimony to be confirmed as a 4-star. And he said, Scott, I got to tell you, brother, the Marines that helped me out, and I went back and told them this later, they were exceptional. The preparation was incredible. And so that might have helped me during my interview process get the job. I don't know. And maybe did, but kudos to you and the team that does that. Kudos to, quite frankly, all of the service members that get to go do that. It's incredibly important. And I think what it does, Joe, is it allows you to have operate at the tactical level and now elevate to the strategic level, the uber strategic level, because you're talking to people that are literally in charge of the purse strings.
Scott, I jump in on this. One of my distinct memories, and something I used to tell really the younger Marines when I was at DAMNAC, I'd bring all the students into my office when they would arrive, is just distinct memory I have of taking General Stewart to go to a confirmation hearing, and the prep session that went into that, and being in the vehicle riding with you. And I thought, I was like, there's 3 Suburbans here. I'm probably going to be in the back of the last Suburban. And, somebody called like, Joe, you're needed, up in the front. And next thing you know, I'm like riding to, the Capitol, sitting right next to General Stewart, the DIA director. And, for a moment, when I wasn't running my mouth with him, I was thinking like, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, right? In a tenement building on 18th Avenue and 53rd Street. And I am in a Suburban with this asset, like this,
Yeah.
and we're going to talk to Congress about, national security, right? And it just amazed me that I was provided the opportunity to do that. And there's one thing that I really wanted to make sure the younger folks that were, enlisting or, going through the intel school was, back in 1997, when I was in intel school, waxing the deck there, the last thing I thought was that I was going to be in a Suburban riding to Capitol Hill with the director of the DIA, right? And it just, I wanted to make sure they understood that as they were progressing in their career, that, their challenge, their transition, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but their transition, out of the service starts the day they get out of boot camp, right? And how they're preparing themselves and how they're educating themselves to get to a point where they could do that job later on down the road. Because these were my opportunities, but their opportunities, the way we're developing the enlisted force right now, their opportunities can be so amazing, so massive, right? Readily available, hopefully, as they move on their career. But it was a great memory. I really appreciate that, and you're definitely on that wall that I talked about earlier.
Those private rides that you and I have had many of with senior leaders, those are things that we take to the grave with us, right? And certainly an awful lot that we'll never speak about or talk about, or conversations overheard. And that's why we're in those positions, because trust is implied. It's a guaranteed thing there. But the reason you were in that seat is because you're competent. It's not about, at that point when we're driving over to Congress, who has what position and title. It's, hey, the DIA director is going to be the individual in front of Congress, and he needs to hear what you have to say, and he's going to have hard questions. And I know he's uber prepared. Gary, good to hear from you, brother, in Okinawa. Gary's my brother. Love that guy. He's exceptional. He's out there doing great things for the Corps and continuing to lead. So, Gary, good to hear from you. All right, so last bit of in uniform thing, Joe, is, and I don't know why it's coming up as LinkedIn user, but Ura, my teammate here, and I wish I knew the names of these individuals. But Joe, one of the other things that I can spend years talking about the greatness of General Stewart. But one of the other things I appreciated is if I brought something to him, he would listen. It didn't mean he would always agree, but he would listen. And there was an opportunity for us to get a Marine Master Gunnery Sergeant out in INDOPACOM in the J2. And that was a bit unheard of early on. We didn't do that. We filled the fleet and we did these things, but the Corps had realized the importance, and I say the Corps as an institution, certainly Marines inside understood, but the importance of the Indo-Pacific theater and the threat with China and the challenges there. And so when that opportunity came, you were the man. You were the only one that I think was exceptionally well qualified, tactically to strategic, broadly across leadership. And so you got the chance to go out there in INDOPACOM. Tell us about that, Joe, and how remarkable that was as the first individual out there.
Yeah, it was absolutely amazing opportunity. Interviewing with I think at the time General Cruz, to get out to U.S. INDOPACOM, getting the word that I was accepted probably around this time. I want to say 2017. It was kind of like an early Christmas present. I got told that I was the guy, and then within a week, it's about a month, right after the New Year, we were on a plane out to Hawaii to join that team. And oddly enough, my family will never forget that day. It was actually the day of the false missile alert. So we were about 50,000 feet in the air over the Pacific, and this alert went off on our phones. Modern marvels, right? We're on a plane, the phone goes off. Yeah, and it's like, there's missiles heading to Hawaii, and my wife, turned around and looked at me on the plane like, what did you do to us? But the plane never skipped a beat. We landed, and and it was interesting to go from that, looking at Asia Pacific threat, North Korea, everything was really popping off at that point in time, to when I was leaving, looking at adversaries, throughout the Pacific, what we might be looking at going forward as far as, strategic competition and things of that nature. But I got to see 3 years of that, progress through two great bosses. One of them, you just referenced his book here recently on your reading list, and I got my copy of it. I'm waiting for him to sign it, Admiral Studeman, wherever you are. But he was an excellent boss to work for, and so was General Cruz. I couldn't, ask for, better folks. I will say this though, when I did show up, it was a blank slate as far as the billet goes. It was something that the other combatant commands had that we did not have at Indo-Pacific Command. So we wrote the billet description as we went along, and it took about 3 years to finally get it put on the Manning document there. And I'm forever grateful to Sergeant Major Marine Corps and the SEAC now, Troy Black, for coming on with the Sergeant Major, out there and trying to figure out how to get Marine Corps 0291 structure permanently put out there that we were able to get done. I think the best thing that I've been able to see of that time out there really is the progression with our partners and allies. When I showed up out there, I think the first year I went to this conference in the Asia Pacific region, I was the only enlisted person out there. General Ashley was out there. There's a lot of different folks that were out there from the U.S. side. And then, my boss looked at me and he's like, hey, we need to grow this. And then, just about a month or so ago, I was looking on, Piers, feed, and he posted a picture. He's the person who's holding the seat right now at Indo-Pacific Command. And there must have been about, 10 or 15 enlisted leaders, intelligence enlisted leaders out there from our partners and allies at that same conference. So that was really amazing. Time well spent out there.
Yeah. And we got my brother out there, Sonny Sonneman now, who's out there in that position that you once had. He's the third guy in that seat. But giants you got to work for. I mean, I got to work with Admiral Studeman, way back in the early 90s when I worked at the Joint Intel Center. And then, meeting General Cruz, Jeff Cruz, who's now the director of DIA and doing incredible things there. And then him being replaced by my longtime shipmate and brother, Admiral Hendershett, who is just a remarkable individual and friend of mine. Who's kind of has not to name drop. I don't like to do that, but my point is that and I'm going to come back to you, Joe, but you started off like I did. You from Bronx, I'm from New Hampshire, right? No one's from New Hampshire. And then we get these opportunities, and there's a method to do this. And I'm going to transition into now you've got new opportunities. But let me give you back the floor because you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it did not strike me as odd to see Admiral Studeman publish a book on leadership. The guy is amazing, right? So, like, when I think, and I don't work for him anymore, so I'm happy to say it, but like from a China subject matter expertise realm, and then when I have like in-person conversation with him, weekly leadership notes to the team, just keep the drumbeat going on just constant leadership. I was really enthused to see his words in a book now, so highly. Yeah, I'll dovetail off you, and if I had a reading list, it would be definitely on there.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, he's just an exceptional. And I would offer this too. I hope same thing. I don't expect a medal in the mail from him, but I hope that our elected leaders listen to individuals like him when he talks about China and getting serious, because he's genuinely dead serious about this issue, and we got to be ready. And that means allocating and appropriating funds so that we can have the right military that's ready, well armed and prepared for that. And so, maybe Joe, and this will transition to where we're going to go now, because I just put 27 years into 25 minutes, and that's not possible. But we just packed it all in your career. But a guy like Studeman is someone that, as you deal with Congress in your job today, is someone that I hope, if the opportunity presents, you can grab and say, hey, this is the guy you got to be listening to, along with others. Many others. So Joe, the moment comes, you and your lovely wife, who, I will say, I remember taking you both out to dinner in DC the day before you were going to Hawaii, and it was freezing out. And I said, this is the last time you're going to feel the cold for a long time. I did not know you were going to get a missile attack the very next day as you went to the Aloha land. But at some point, a decision comes, because we would have, we being the Corps, we would have loved to have. Okay, sorry. We would have loved to kept you in for 30, but those decisions are personal. Whether you do 20, whether you do 4, 40, or anything between. How did you come to this decision that 27 remarkable, incredible years was going to be it for you?
Yeah, so there's a lot of giants that started to retire. You're one of them, right? And there's a lot of peers that we have in our community. A very tight knit community. We are very close. Even the retirees and the active duty folks. I couldn't have asked to be in a better community. But my grandmother used to joke about this, and it's kind of morbid, but she would go to as she got older, she'd go to a lot more funerals, right? And I'd be with her, and she'd say, like, am I next? And I think as you start going to everybody's retirement ceremonies, right, you start, especially as you start getting up there in age and rank, you're like, oh wow, that guy's retiring, am I next? Oh wow, that guy's retiring, am I next? That gal's retiring, am I next? So for me, I started feeling that around the it's probably 25, 26 year mark, right? As I started seeing my friends leaving, right? People that I've served with. So that's thing one. I think thing two for me also is and I'll mention it here, right? We have this thing where we plateau as master gunnies, right? Now, some of us get to go straight to the top. Some of us, definitely do. I know for me, after leaving Indo-Pacific Command, I kind of knew that, what's next? Where else can I go? So we start looking at that, and I know, I started talking to my wife about that. So when I left Pacific Command or INDOPACOM, they were like, okay, what's next? And for me, I wanted to be able to give back. There were some things in DC that were popping off that I might have been able to dabble in, but I wanted to go back to the Intel school and be like, hey, young folks, right? Like, I started here. This is where I ended. The world's your oyster. Go for it. And it happened to be in a spot where I wanted to settle down here in Virginia Beach. So, as luck would have it, monitors, everything aligned. Had a great SEA to the Durant at the time. That wanted to invest in the schoolhouse, and I took all of that experience and I went there. And I did about 2.5 years there before I finally retired. But that's how I knew it was time to go. Those two things, right? You look at upward mobility in an organization, and you start capping out, and then at some point you start seeing all your friends leave, and you start kind of thinking it's time to go.
Yeah.
That was it for me anyway.
No. It really is. And, you were incredibly humble to do that, because behind the scenes, I was trying to look at other things for you. And I'll just be frank. I was disappointed that there wasn't greater opportunities for you to go higher, as the other service would have inevitably found for some of your incredible talents. That's a conversation for another day. But if it were up to me right now, I know we name a lot of the buildings and halls and things for admirals and generals who are well deserved and well earned. But that building there in the Mitzi, which really hasn't changed since I went through in '93, and when you went through, I think you said in '97, it's pretty much probably the same exact floors. I would have that building or a hallway or something, maybe the sand pit where someone got thrashed, named after Joe Davila. And I've told General Carter that because you have made such a mark on that place. I mean, everything, when I think of the Mitzi, I think of Jay Joder, Dan Shaler, and you, and I know a lot of others have had a part there, but the molding and the creation of that. So hey, I won't get sentimental here, but so you
Scott,
go ahead.
Can I just? There's two other things that I did fail to mention that as you were talking, we're thinking, right? So, faith has played a large part in my life, and I think we all tend to hold on, right? And I'm speaking to maybe some folks who might be thinking about whether it's time to get out or not, right? I know for me, my decision really got cemented at church one Sunday, right, where the choir was kind of singing along the song "Something's Got to Break," right? And it really talks about transition, right? Like to move on to the next level, something's got to break. And for me, I needed to break the mindset that I had to stay in, right? So again, it was the first job, my adult life, right? I was 17 when I joined. So, heading into my, mid 40s, I was like, man, I don't know anything else, right? And then the second thing being my wife, having a chat with her about, what our future looked like, what our goals were as I was transitioning, because she had been by my side the whole time, supporting me through deployments and, late nights doing, God knows what on Capitol Hill at INDOPACOM and then at the schoolhouse. So I wanted to make sure that, as we were transitioning, we were all in concert here and kind of pushing forward what she wanted to do since she had been with me this whole time. So those, I guess I would say four things now, right? Those would be the extra two.
Well, Rebecca's an incredible wife, but also a shipmate, right? So let's shout out to her and her service as a veteran too. So you decide to retire. You submit and we have the ceremony and whatnot. How did you come about deciding on where to live? I'm going to go through some phases of this, but the decision on where to live. Now you have not younger, you have children, I guess moderately younger, that are still at the house. So that's young enough. And what was the driving factor on where to live there in Virginia Beach for you?
We'd been stationed here before when I was a course director, for the entry-level Marines when I was an E7 gunny. So this place had kind of been the closest thing to community we'd had. And I'd say every place we've lived has been awesome, but a lot of times you find these really military communities as you go throughout your career, right? So you're living on base housing, everybody's transient and whatnot. When we moved to Virginia Beach, our neighbors were family and they were not in the military, right? My closest neighbor to me, I gave her flowers at my retirement ceremony. Her name's Deb. She was like, our family here, right? Her and her husband. So to be quite honest with you, we gave her power. She signed for our house, right? When we were moving back, that's how close we got to the people here in Virginia Beach. So, at the end of the day, we were like, where did we feel at home? And this was it, for our family. So when we had the chance to come back, in my mind, I was already kind of, doing the hover, right? We were in a hover pattern, right? I knew this is probably the place we were going to land and make home. That and schools, right? Schools here are amazing in Virginia, specifically Virginia Beach. They've got some great schools here, and I've got teenagers. So I wanted to make sure that they had the best education opportunities possible here.
Yeah. I'm of the belief that that's the number one decision for you is where to live.
Yeah.
And especially if you have options, because you can find work, whether it's remote or physical or hybrid, but you will be happiest in the place you live. And I love Virginia Beach too. My best man is up there. You're up there. A lot of teammates are up there. I'm up there a couple times a year for different events. And so I think the world of Virginia Beach, except for that damn tunnel, but we won't go there. And the same thing for us is we, I didn't care what I was going to do next. Well, I cared, but I wasn't focused on that at all initially. It's where we're going to live. And Mallory, my wife, picked it here, and here we are. And I certainly supported that decision. And so you decide where you're going to live. How did you come across the decision on what you're going to do? And as you're going through that too, putting together a resume. Walk us through that process.
Yeah, so what I was going to do, my whole career, a lot of folks have come, and they're like, okay, your job that you did in the military, your clearance, all these things, they're going to pay the bills when you get out. It's going to be great. It's going to be awesome, right? And I definitely, took that in, and it's true, right? Like, if you've done the right things up to the point where you get out, your career, the job that you have, our job definitely transitions over to civilian sector. But for me, I really was looking for something that would allow me to break with a little bit, right? I wanted to break with what I had been doing. I wanted to be able to learn something new. I looked at this as an opportunity to reinvent myself. I did not do what a lot of folks do when it comes to, and again, these thoughts are mine. I'm sure everybody goes through transition once. This was my transition. Uh, I did not do the SkillBridge program. I was at a command where I really wanted to devote my time to that command, and I had enough terminal leave saved up where, when I did retire, I had my first summer vacation, in 27 years, right? I took,
Right.
time I needed to decompress. So that was it for me. I contracted for a little bit, probably about 3 or 4 months, and I had saw a job post for congressional relations at a command here, and I, immediately thought that was kind of, that was where my interest lied, right? That was kind of what I wanted to do. The little taste that I got of it, with the Marine Corps and the awesome crew at Marine Corps OLA, really kind of, invigorated me. My time at DIA, working the portfolio there was amazing, and it transitioned well. Resume wise, I would have to say, there are a lot of different resume, folks out there that will help, veterans transitioning, young folks transitioning, senior folks transitioning. For me, the resume became a distraction, and like you had mentioned, trying to fit 27 years into like 5 pages is very difficult, right? So I paid somebody to write my resume for me. And he was awesome. Guy's name, I think he's Lex Levin. He's got a site. He did great work for me. He's kind of like a resume artist, I would say. I sent him some stuff. He interviewed me like 2 or 3 times, and the product I got allowed me to apply to multiple jobs based off of what I had there. And really, for me, I was able to focus on my interviews and my cover letters. It's pricey. It's an investment. I would, if you're interested in doing it, just understand it's pricey because you're paying somebody to do something for you that is, it can be very cumbersome. But for me, it was money well spent. It was an investment because by the time I was able to get the job that I'm in now, the thing practically paid for itself. I appreciated the ability to be able to focus on interviews and cover letters and the job search, aspect of my retirement, vice having to figure out how to craft like multiple resumes for multiple different things.
Hey, I want to pull a few things out of there too. I also made the decision not to go SkillBridge, but mine was more, I think, personal. Quite frankly, I just was not going to give anyone free labor. I viewed it that way. You do not get me for free. Others see it differently, and that's okay. That's what transition is. It's personal to you, and your decision to make. And so for you, going into the field, and I would offer as well. I also had a woman named Cassie, help me with my resume, and I paid for it. Now I never used it to get a job because I don't have a job, quote unquote, but I'm consulting for multiple organizations, and they all wanted that resume. And here's how you know it worked: you got the job, right? So what, and I want to differentiate because mine's 2 pages. But that's the corporate world. You said yours was 5. This is an area that, I often get labeled as someone who has expertise in transition. I know a few things, but I don't know the government side. You do, Joe. You went that route. And God bless you for doing that because we need people like you in these assignments. And so is that what it takes? Is it a 5-pager for the government positions?
There's a standard resume format. USA Jobs has one, that you can kind of do. Sometimes when you apply for jobs on USA Jobs, they will only allow you to put in the USA Jobs canned like resume, right? Right. Some folks, if you look at the job posting, will tell you not to go above a certain amount of pages because everything over 5 pages won't be looked at. But there are specific things that you need on the government resume. Salaries, I think, is one of them. There's a lot of different things that you need on there that probably wouldn't be on my civilian resume. When I tried to apply for some contracting gigs, civilian jobs, those were absolutely like 2 pages, maybe 3, right? At most, right? But just because of the specifics needed in the government resume, again, the guy that I hired to do that was perfect. And to be quite honest with you, I was able to take what he provided me with the longer resume and kind of tailor it to some of the civilian jobs I applied for as I was going down the mix. I batted very well as far as, if I applied for a job, maybe with the exception of about 5 or 6, I got an interview. So he did an exceptional job with it. And again, the cover letters mean a lot. And, okay. So I'll also say this, like what's in the resume means a lot as well. Right.
Yeah.
And, I think that, if I were to, just wax eloquent for a little bit, when I was getting ready to pick up E9, people get paranoid, right? And I was looking at, my master brief sheet and I was like, man, I haven't swim qualled in like, I don't know, 6, 7 years, right? I probably need to do that just in case of, so I find myself at swim qual, where I normally, wouldn't swim qualled, right? But I'm there and I'm swim qualling and I see somebody else and then there's another E8 looking to E9. And I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm going to rifle range next week. And I started thinking like, this is getting a little kind of silly right now, right? Like, but I think sometimes transition looks like that too, right? As you're getting out, you're like trying to cram everything. Like I see people trying to throw PMP certs into, this, that, they're trying to put as many acronyms at the end of their name as they can the last year they're in. But like I said earlier, your transition starts the day you get off, you walk across parade deck or wherever you graduate from, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Space Force, you start working that. So I was lucky enough to have seized opportunities along the way that differentiated my career to a point where when I put my resume together, I had a lot of different wickets that I knew I could ping on depending on what type of job I wanted. I had done training, so I could put, I could emphasize that. I've done congressional affairs. I could emphasize that. I was an intel guy for, 27 years. I could emphasize that. Drill instructor, right? All of these things mean something. And it really helps as you look at your career. That's a marathon, not a race, right? To try to figure out where you can put things as you move along. For me, education was also really important. I was able to, do a lot of things to, kind of, blow that up. I think for me also going into the job hunt, and again, I knew I would be here at some point in time. So when I was a staff sergeant at Gunny, I was like, what would make me competitive, say, against, a very senior person, right? Or maybe, even an officer who might be trying to apply for the same job. Well, they go to Command and Staff College, they go to EWS. So I did that, right? Enlisted folks can go to EWS, enlisted folks can go to Command and Staff College, JP and Me2, things of that nature, right? So that, if somebody were to look at my resume, pound for pound, assignments and education, I would not lack there, right? And everybody has those opportunities. I encourage folks to use TA, get after PME, because all of that stuff means something as you're transitioning. And the more diversified you are, it's more like a kaleidoscope as far as what you want your resume to look like as you're narrowing in on certain jobs that you might have passion for as you transition.
Yeah, let me pull 2 things out of that I want the audience to hear. One, as incredible as you are, you didn't get a call back on everything you applied for.
No.
Nobody will. Nobody will, right? And so be prepared to not get a call back, to just, I don't even know if you get an email saying, sorry, no, thank you, but be prepared for that. You're not going to get everything you shoot for. And so having multiple opportunities out there is incredibly important. And then, Joe, you alluded to the fact that you didn't just write a resume and fire it off. You tailored it for the opportunity. If they needed training, you emphasized your training. If they needed leadership, maybe you emphasize their leadership. If they needed what you're doing now, which is where we're going to go next, you emphasize legislative affairs. And so you're now you apply for this job. Can you walk the audience through the interview process? And then at some point, someone calls you or you get an email that says you're hired. What should they expect? Is that when you start negotiating for your pay grade, for your step? I want them to understand what this looks like, Joe. So if blank slate, no one understands this, you've applied. Let's talk about the interview. Let's talk about what that looks like up until the first day of starting.
All right, there's, so interviews are, potpourri, right? Like I had interviews where I was in person in a boardroom where I was sitting at the head of the table and there was just people like pinging me with questions. I've had interviews where, I showed up and, there was maybe one or two people sitting there. I've had interviews where I've known everybody on the panel, and those are probably the most stressful ones because your resume, and some of the cover letter stuff that you do, like they know you, right? Like, they're not supposed to use it, but they definitely know you, right? So, all great stuff, right? The interview that got me a job was actually a phone interview. I was on a telephone interview and like two or three people on the other end answering questions. So hang the phone up, probably a day or so goes by and I get a call back, saying, hey, you're our selectee. And probably about, a couple of minutes later, I see something in USA Jobs tagging me to start doing all, the annual training that we love to do, trying to knock all that stuff out within like a week, to get things squared away. And then, the final job offer comes in. So that was a tentative job offer, right? And then you do all the, paperwork and stuff. Then the final job offer comes in. There was a gap between my tentative job offer and my final job offer. And that's because I was in that 180-day period. And I think everybody knows about, most people do, as their transition is a cool-off period. I was lucky enough to be in a situation where the skill sets that I had were very unique. Moving into a congressional affairs job, not a lot of folks have some of those requisite, skill sets or background. So it did give, I think, my supervisor the ability to justify the waiver. And that waiver can take somewhere between 2 weeks to 6 months, depending on, who's, what wickets it's kind of going through. For me, I think it took about a month or so, maybe a month and a half to get cleared there. And then I got the final job offer right after that. And I started about 2 weeks later.
Awesome. And so that the leadership, the experience, all the things you did in the Corps, especially working with Congress, brought you to where you are today. So tell us about, what are you doing these days, Joe? What is this job, right? Are you up there wheeling and dealing? Are you getting the next F-35 for us? What does this do? What do you do, Joe? And both your connections to our elected officials and the military, what does that look like today?
Yeah, it looks a lot like what I was doing when I was in the Marine Corps. If I'm being honest, we're working with you. We handle requests and inquiries as they come in, depending on constituent type stuff. I like solving problems, so people problems are awesome as they come in. They're not awesome, but I like to be able to help and solve issues. So being kind of a interlocutor, between Congress and the command I'm at right now is really awesome. And the team I'm with empowers me to do that role, so it's great. And then also advocating, I did that, when I was with you at DIA, advocating the agency's priorities and advocating for resources. Those are all things that, I would say advocate, maybe looking for support and things of that nature. But, at the end of the day, really taking care of the command that I'm assigned to and working through any issues between, Congress and the command, that falls inside my work role.
Awesome. It's incredible. Back to that interview process, and you and I have talked about this before. You also had an interview that, hey, you made it to the final cut, and then it didn't work out. And we were talking about that. We'll leave out the specifics of it. But walk us through that, right? And so you still prepare, you still go into it. And at that point you're committed. If they call you, you're going to get the gig. But walk us through that, and then and maybe how you rebound's a harsh word because it wasn't like you were in the dumps, but how you move on from getting an interview and not working out.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with any board. If you're in the military and you're transition, you've been on boards before. You've experienced disappointment. You've been through those things. It doesn't stop you from like putting your full forth effort into getting into those situations and doing putting your best foot forward. I know for me, as you transition. Well, I would say as you look for jobs, I would look at them as kind of promotion boards, right? And I would use E9 as the example. When I was up for E9, I looked at my wife and I was like, I think the board results are going to come out today. One way or another, I'm coming home and I'm going to have a glass of Blue Label Scotch because I either got it or I know I'm transitioning. One way or another, we're making decisions tonight, right? So, at the end of the day, as you approach these jobs, you go to the interview, you think you nailed it. just because you didn't get the job doesn't mean you didn't nail it. If you think you nailed it, don't kick yourself in the butt. Just know you nailed it and move on. If there are some after action things that you might have in your mind on how to prepare for the next, go at it, go for it. But these are job interviews. There's a million of them out there. Go for it. Put your best foot forward. If you don't get it, there's plenty of fish in the sea. There's a lot of work to be had out here. So I would just continue to encourage you to, don't give up, and, for me, a lot of it looked like tailoring that resume, making an impactful cover letter. And then, as you approach the interview, you're in there, right? Just go give it your best, your best shot.
Yeah. And I've given advice to folks that interview, and my mindset has always been, if I get a fair interview, I'm going to get the gig. It doesn't always work out that way, but all you can do is control the controllables, and you prepare, you study, you rehearse, you reach out to mentors and coaches to get advice, and then you go in and you give your best. And and the ones that we haven't won, that means someone else. Doesn't mean they were better than you. They were better for that position in the eyes of the people with the authority to bring them on board. And God bless those individuals. I'm happy for them. I know one, as well, and those type of things. And then you got to move on. And all you can do is control those controllables. When you allow it to fester in your mind, it's dangerous. But Joe, we talked about the resume. What I would also offer is incredibly important, and you have control of this too, although this is in the opinions of others, is your professional reputation. And whether the someone that's applying for a job and then they call people on your contact list or whatever, that professional reputation is critical. Can you touch on that for a moment too, and how that may or may not have impacted you at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of us experience this as we apply to different programs and stuff throughout our career. I would tell you early on, like I mentioned about DI school, that guy, James Jones, that I had mentioned earlier, he played a tremendous role in my life, Marine Corps dad, right?
Yeah.
And when I realized the impact he could have on a person's future within 6 hours and like 5 of those hours being evening time, right? In my mind, as I approached being a leader, I wanted to make sure that when I put my signature on somebody's name, or if I wrote a letter of recommendation, or if I recommended somebody for something, I wanted to make sure that I had the same impact that he had. And that was a lot of preparation there too. So as I approach transition, when it, comes to the point where you're supposed to like who would you like them to call, right? I named you as one of them, right? I would say cast a wide net, talk to folks, but at the same time, look at the job that you're applying for and try to match the person that you're asking to reference you with the job, the person that could speak to your ability to do that job. So when I was applying for leadership positions, I think I threw you on there as one of them because I think the world of you as a leader, and I wanted you to be able to talk to me on that. When I was applying for congressional affairs positions, I started throwing names of folks that I worked with, at DIA and some of the folks on the Hill that I worked with in the member's office, because I wanted them to be able to talk to those things if somebody were to contact them. So I would say be very judicious about who you're putting on there. You might have a big Rolodex of people. Sometimes folks want to put the highest ranking person that they have on their Rolodex on things. And, that might be awesome, but if they can't talk to your ability to do the job, you're losing an opportunity, right? At least that's the way I looked at it, or I approached it.
Yeah. And that, I think that's a great segue here. And Sean, I'm going to get to your question in a moment, but what I love about that is, I'm certainly not the person you want to call when it comes to congressional liaison, right? One, I just don't like being in those conversations, but two, it's not an area of expertise for me. So why would you? But in this section, you found that there was expertise. And so be mindful of that. Hey, my brother, Sean Nicow, who I got to see not too long ago out in California, who is just, again, another one of those guys on the Mount Rushmore of leaders. He wants to know about a mistake you made during your transition or soon after. If you have, does Joe Davila make mistakes first off?
Yeah, I definitely make mistakes. You could ask my wife. I make a lot of mistakes. She keeps a list. It's rolling. Look, when I look at that question, I will say this. From a work aspect, I think I hit the lotto. I am in a great organization. I'm with great people. I have great supervisors. I couldn't ask for a better job. And I actually posted on LinkedIn about that earlier in the week as I hit my 1-year anniversary here. I will tell you that my first visit to the doctor, and I've shared this with our little small group, right? After I retired and I got out, my first visit to the doctor was shocking, right? And he told me very straight. He's like, you did 27 years of Marine, and all of those years as a Marine, hide a lot of your bad habits, right? And a lot of it looks like, man, do I really want to go for a run today? Do I really want to, that Big Mac looks a lot better than it did like 6 months ago when I was worried about having to take my PFT and stuff, right? So my health, if I were to tell you, it's not necessarily a mistake, but it's something I'm trying to correct now. Most folks get out, they grow like these massive beards, they become like, 10, 15 pounds heavier. I did not grow a massive beard, but I definitely got the pounds. If you're transitioning, you get paid to PT. As you approach the civilian sector, your health becomes your responsibility, and it's very important to maintain your health and maintain your physical activity because it will cease to be something that your employers really are worried about on your behalf. It's not a readiness issue for them.
Yeah, no, great point. And Sean, I think we talked about this, but I tend to have a long-term approach to everything, but I wish I probably would have unplugged a little more and enjoyed the moment of my terminal leave a little more. I still got it mostly right, but I would say if you allot yourself the time, unplug a little bit. Yeah, and Eric hits on this too. Love the health focus. Please, ladies and gentlemen, please focus on your health. I don't think you need to be perfect at this. We don't need to run 300 PFTs every day, but please focus on your health. As you get older, it does not get better. Last question in here from Devin. How often do employers ask you to seek out transitioning veterans for upcoming positions? I hear from people every single day. Every single day I get sent opportunities and I dish them out. I just sent one to a teammate. I'm not going to throw names out here, but one of the guys Joe and I recognize. Actually, Sean Nakow, I got something for you I'm going to send here in a moment as well. And then I allow people to make their, well, not allow, but they make their own decisions on what's best for them. And I think that's the power of this network is looking out for others and finding opportunities for others, especially if you're in a good position. I find myself in where I'm doing a lot of things, but if I'm not taking care of others, especially veterans and service members, I'm failing. So Joe, let me throw that to you and then we'll conclude here in a moment.
As far as employers ask you to seek out transition, I'm in a federal job right now, so the USA Jobs is there. If you're interested, I'd say get after it. But I would tell you, look, there are jobs out there. I know that I was transitioning. When I was transitioning, the worry, I think everybody has this thought in their head, like, am I going to have a job? Right? Is there something going to be there for me? There's plenty of jobs out there, and whatever your focus is in the military, if you're retiring, you've done something with excellence for a very long time, and there is a civilian equivalent out there for you someplace. So I would really encourage you, don't worry about those type of things because it's there. It's really a matter of trying to put your skill sets on paper, figuring out how you're going to approach, advertising your skill sets, and then, the marriage will occur at some point in time.
Yeah, I agree. And one of many reasons I wanted to bring you on the show, Joe, is because there's a divergence of path, right? And everyone has to find the road that is their path and fulfills their dreams and passions and desires. And while I have found mine, I certainly haven't reached the conclusion of that journey. I'm excited to see what you're doing because I know how much you loved working with Congress and individuals. And this isn't about a Democrat and Republican conversation. This is about pursuing passions and being able to help our elected leaders, which I hope is what we like, regardless of who's in office and what level of office. We want to see them succeed for the good of our nation. So, Joe, I'm going to turn this over to you in a moment for some closing thoughts. Thank you for being a remarkable guest, and thanks for the great questions and folks that have joining us. So, I often throw out books that I recommend. I recently sent out my 2025 reading list, but I'm not done. And I want to keep reading and keep learning. And I got some folks that are writing books, and so I'll continue to push those. But I just picked this one up. Alexei Navalny, Patriot. If you haven't heard about him, obviously in Russia, and what happened to him in prison, and how he just conveniently died in a prison. I'm certain Vladimir Putin had nothing to do with that. And there's certainly no love lost between me and Russia. I'm honored to be banned by name in the country of Russia because of Vladimir Putin. So I look forward to reading his book. And when we talk about courage, the courage this man had definitely in the face of a dictator, of an oligarch, of a leader of a nation who is a thug, been labeled a thug by some of our elected leaders. I can't wait to read about Alexei Navalny, and I hope others do as well. Last point is, again, please, if you can, look out for Toys for Tots, and whether it's a toy, a small donation, if you're able to, we'd love to see that. We're going to take the rest of the year off, right, and come back on the 3rd of January, 2025. Happy New Year, ladies and gentlemen, where my guest will be the CEO of JCTM, Mr. Audie Cooper, a friend of mine who gave me my first opportunity, but I want to start getting into some CEOs and recruiters so the veteran community can listen to them and hear what's out there and available. So, Joe, thanks for being a guest. Any closing thoughts from you, sir?
Yeah, absolutely. Mentor people. If we're at this stage in your career, you have done something right, and it's our job to bring folks along. And so yesterday I was in the Pentagon, and I actually ran into a Marine that had heard me talk about the Congressional Fellowship and had applied. And I recognized him immediately because he had asked me for a letter of recommendation. I saw his name, on the list, and I was really stoked to run into him in the Pentagon. Awesome. And for him to come up to me and say, hey, the only reason, I really knew about this program is because somebody like you had told me about it. That was impactful to me, right? And hopefully you all and your listeners, as you see people along the way, I'd encourage you to just mentor them. I am a product of a lot of different things. Definitely my background. My mom took care of me, kept me out of trouble so I could actually join the Marine Corps. I had a lot of different folks kind of, mentor me along the way. I mentioned a few of them here, but I think one email I got when I picked up Corporal from one of my mentors said, mentors live forever. And they do. Mentors live forever. And if you're one of them, you're seeding the success of folks that will precede you in the military. So please do that. 2 books that I would recommend. They're definitely not new. How to Win Friends and Influence People by I think Dale Carnegie. And then
I didn't tell you to say that, by the way.
No, not at all. But 360 Degree Leader by Maxwell was also a awesome book for anybody, no matter what stage you are in your leadership journey. But thanks for the opportunity, Scott. This has been a novel thing to do for the week, and I'll close it out. And I'm about done with my scotch, so this is perfect timing.
Amen. Well, Joe, to you and your family, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, brother. Again, I mean this sincerely. Guys like you belong on that Mount Rushmore of intelligence professionals. Thanks for all you've done. Thanks for all you continue to do for our country. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to you as well. We're out.